A lot of people are probably going to be watching this on YouTube, so make sure you hit yes that you agree to it. You never know. This is probably going to go viral. So
we might need to remove Angel.
Yeah. Oh snap! Angel on blast. Putting Angel on blast. He might make us famous. You never know. So Welcome, guys. Bobby, you get a +1 for that little dig. You guys will understand here in a moment when I tell you all about the point system. This is Wine 101 Module 2. Did everyone enjoy your first session on Precipio? Were there any? I know a couple people might have had some issues, but most everyone got to finish it today. By today, I mean. Okay, great. So as I mentioned last week, the #1 rule is to interrupt me because I want this to be a conversation. All I care about is engagement. I don't care about passing assessments as much. You will pass the assessments if you are engaged, right? And we're gonna taste some wines today. Some of you will taste them later this afternoon, I'm told, which is totally fine, but pay attention to our tasting notes. And if you haven't, I think I mentioned this in orientation, we're gonna do the sparkling wines as well. So if you haven't chilled them already, go ahead and throw them in your freezer or in a, does anyone know the quickest way to chill down wine if it's at room temperature?
You put it in a salted ice bath.
Yes, Kelly, +1 for Kelly. Yeah, an ice bath is the quickest way to do it. So if you forgot to get the sparklings, that's fine. Either stick them in the fridge or freezer, or you could put them in a quick ice bath. You know, just drop a quick ice bath real quick.
You can wrap it in a wet paper towel too and throw it in the freezer for a few minutes.
There you go. Yeah, beautiful. Bobby with another 2 points on the board already.
They get a beer cold quick.
Yeah, there you go. Use the Miller Lite technique. I like it. Yeah, that trunk beer technique. All right. Thank you, everyone, for giving me your Desert Island Wines. Is Chris with us this morning? Chris Dietzel, is that you?
Yeah.
Hey, did you ever think of a desert island wine? And what that means is it's a wine where you're stuck on a desert island, and I'll let you think about it for a few minutes because I've already assigned you a team, but you can only drink one wine for the rest of your life. What would it be? It's a big question.
Cabernet.
Cabernet. Okay, beautiful. Any brand in particular?
No, not really.
Just all the Cabernet. How about that?
Yep.
Beautiful. All right, cool. So as promised, I have judged you all on your suggestions or your desert island wines, and I've split you up into teams. Hope you're okay with them. If you'd like your team name to be amended, let me know. If you would rather be on another team, we might sort you somewhere else. The first name of the team I'm still trying to figure out, but okay, so here we go. First team is Chateau Saint something. You guys need to figure it out. Everyone in this group, their choice was Chateau Saint Michelle, either Indian Wells or Columbia Valley, et cetera, et cetera. So Chateau Saint, hell yeah, I was thinking, or something. Get together and decide on a cool name for you guys. So this is Kevin, Lauren, Taylor, and Drake. And then the next team will be ISIP, Cabernet, which will be, these are all Cabernet based wines for your desert island group. So is it Brent or Alan? I forget what you go by. Brent, right?
Yeah, Brent.
Okay, it's such like a cool, sounds like a country music name, Brent Allen McClay. Yeah, but
yeah, I miss my calling.
Yeah, exactly. Schleppin' wine is just as cool, right, guys? Right. So Brent, I'm going to take the Allen out later, just so I remember. So Brent, Alex, Angel, and Rayal is on team ISIP, Cabernet. Pinophilia, Pinophiles, Pinot Noir or Pinot Grigio fans here. We have Justin Dugan, Austin Hecht, Cyrus, and Tariq. And then side of bourbon, this one, the name could also be changed, but I believe Kelly wanted Cava with bourbon. Bobby just wanted wanted the bourbon barrel, right? Wine. And then Josh, I'm trying to remember did you have the Southern Free?
Yeah.
And Mesa, I apologize. So I didn't know where to put 19 Crimes Rosé. So I just stuck you in with side of bourbon. If you guys want to think of a new team name, that's cool. But I thought this would be a nice balanced team. And Chris, I didn't know what you would have on your desert island, so I put you here temporarily. But no, I think you're gonna stay there. Okay, cool. So someone's giving me robot feedback. Who is that? Okay, it stopped. All right. So you might be wondering now, Professor, how do I get points? Well, that's very easy. It's placing in Kahoot quizzes, which we'll do one here in a minute. Answering questions correctly in class, engaging with the class is huge, chiming in, asking a question. I'm going to send this email called Big Email, and if you were to respond with a meme or an inspirational quote or something to do with wine, you get points. Just replying all to that big email. And then Professor's Choice. So I'm going to pick somebody at random. Cyrus, looking good this morning. You get a point. Congratulations. So it's all very willy-nilly. It's just a power trip for me, really. You get a +1, so now Pinophilia is on the board. Well done. So any questions about this thus far? Easy enough, right?
Hey, Connor, I don't have a team.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm on an island by myself, I think.
You are Team Matt, I guess. Oh, shoot. All right. So were you on the list before here?
Yes.
Whoops. What was your... Oh, dang. Well, that's embarrassing. All right. Well, this is interesting because you get to be your own sorting hat. What team would you like to be on, Matt?
It does not matter to me.
All right,
we're gonna win. We're gonna win whose ever team I'm on. So.
All right. I like that. So who would like Matt on their team? Speak up first.
Cabernet will take them.
Cabernet. Okay. The Cabernet. All right. So Matt, you are now on team I sip a Cabernet. Is that good? All right. Good deal. So what is it all for? So the highest scoring team will receive a bottle based on their team's wine family. Oh, I just saw your message, Matt. Apologies. All right. Does anyone else hear that robot? I hear a robot. Was that Chris? Were you trying to?
Yep.
Is my internet bad, or can you guys hear what someone's saying?
He said he's on. He said we're gonna win.
It's a robot voice.
I do not know. I'm trying to figure out where that came from. Is it Bobby or is it Chris? You guys are only
That
on
ain't
video
me.
right now.
Testing.
Okay, well, our R2D2 is with us somewhere. I don't know where. All right, so give me jazz hands if you've ever played Kahoot before. Give me some jazz hands, unless you're driving. Okay, most of you guys, a lot of you guys know Kahoot. Some of you do not. That's fine. We're gonna do one real quick. So what you're gonna do is go to kahoot.it. It's a quiz. Oops. A quiz with a lot of stakes, because you see for your team, if you get first place in this thing, you get 10 points for your team. Second place is 7 points, and third place is 3 points. So go. It's really important not to go to kahoot.com. Go to kahoot.it. And we're going to do a little quiz based on the Precipio module. Okay, so what you're going to do, once you get there, it's going to ask for a game pin, and that pin is 744-9171. 744-9171. All right, cool. Alex and Josh have figured it out, says Lauren. Good deal. Make sure you guys were paying attention to the module. Ooh, I like the accent on, is it Angel? Does that make it Angel or Angel? I like it.
It is Angel.
Angel. I'm so sorry. I've been saying Angel like a dummy. Angel.
Don't worry, Bobby does too.
He got him back. All right, is everyone in? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
We get the code one more time, please.
744-9171. Who is the side of Bourbon? Who's playing as the whole team? All right.
Name, so I thought you meant our team name.
Oh no, who said that?
Bobby, you see what I'm saying? Slow.
Angel gets a point now for that one. You guys are going back and forth.
It's not letting me get in though either. It just says Kahoot play quizzes.
It says what?
It's just sitting there. It just says you're in. That's it. Just,
Oh, then you're good.
oh, okay.
A double-sided slow.
All right, y'all, let's go ahead and get this thing started. So, by the way, you're going to use your phone as a remote control. So it's going to give you A, B, C, and D on your phone. Ready? So question 1, who is the largest consumer of wine in the world? Is it France, Italy, USA, or my wife, Jessica? Who is it? Hopefully she can't hear me in the other room. It is USA. Now, the largest consumer of wine total, you guys might be thinking per capita was France, right? But largest consumer, if someone had put my wife, they would have gotten an extra 2 points, but no one did. That's okay. Let's move on to question 2 here. Brent on top, but Drake and Real right behind him. Question
If you use
2.
the app, you don't see the question.
True or false? The color of wine is determined by the pulp of the grape. Is that true or false? What do we think? All right, that's right. Yeah, it's false, right? It's not. It's the skins and seeds and tannins and stuff. We'll talk about that later. Does someone have a question? So
Yeah, if you use the app, you can't see the questions. You just see the different color answers. So I've got to log in.
No. So that's okay. You're looking at our screen for the question. I'm reading them out, and then you just use your phone as a remote, kind of like a remote control.
You have to jump back and forth.
Yeah, we
what?
have to jump back and forth, but sometimes it kicks us out, and we're trying to see the color to correlate to the one to push. Trying to do both on the phone.
Oh, on one device. I gotcha.
Yeah, that's why we're late.
Whoops. All right. Well, yeah, that's what the advantage of sitting at a desk with 2 devices, right? Phone and computer. I apologize. Question 3, what percentage water is in an average bottle of wine? Is it 64, 74, 84, or 94? Okay, kind of a mixed bag here, but 84%, right? We learned that in the module. Most of us got that. Okay, Brent still on top, but Dugan and Side of Bourbon right behind. So question 4, what's the most important decision a winemaker has? Is it how to prevent hail, pruning, pest control, or when to harvest the wine? This one's a little subjective, but I believe in it. Oh, beautiful. 15 out of 15. Love it. All right. Can anyone catch Brent? A couple more to go here. Question 5. Crushed or pressed, wine that is ready for fermentation is called what? The cuvee, the must, the crush, or the mash? What is it called? All right, perfect. Most of us got it's the must, right? The mosto, the must. Ooh, it's getting close here at the top between Brent and Dugan, Justin Dugan.
Yeah, I hit the wrong color, or I would have had that one.
Ooh, true or false? American oak is tighter grained than French. Is that true or false?
I love how Brent was making excuses.
I love it too.
You could talk trash when you catch me, Dugan.
All right, here we go. Final results here. We got KP in 3rd place with 3 points. That's Kelly Poole, I guess, right? And Dugan with 7 points. And then who is our 1st place? Oh, Brent, well done. All right, you guys, smile for the screenshot. This is how I record points. I need big smiles all around. Pretend like you're enjoying everything. Perfect. All right, so easy enough, right? Okay. Cool. So congratulations to our top 3 there. me get back into here. And let me move you guys so I can see you. Any questions on the Kahoot? Perfect. So I'm not allowing any questions, so that works out. All right, so what we're going to be covering today is briefly recapping what we learned in Module 1. We'll talk about closures. Try to put the most boring thing first. So we'll talk about closures and then stemware, and then we'll get into sparkling wine, white wine, rosé, and factors affecting cost. So this is mainly just for you to see. Stop me if anyone had any questions from Module 1. What is wine? We defined it, right? We talked about the history of wine, and we talked about how America is the largest consumer of wine, even though, you know, there's the per capita is 16 bottles per person versus the French 69. You know, the French population is what, 80 million, 100 million, something like that. We're at a 350 or something. So it works out for us to be the biggest consumer. All right, we figured out what's in a bottle. 520 grapes, a lot of calories, unfortunately for me, when I'm mowing down a bottle on a Friday night. 84% water was the answer to that question. 14% alcohol thereabouts on average. And then that 2% would be all the other things, right? What's in a grape? We just reviewed that on the Kahoot, right? Most of the insides of grapes are pretty much clear. The color of the wine comes from the contact with the skin. We call that maceration. That's really important. You're getting all the color from the skins, right? You're getting tannin and you're getting flavor from them as well. Okay, so the amount of color, tannin, flavor is determined by the length of maceration. Any questions there? Easy enough. All right, moving along, how wine is made. You harvest, you crush, you ferment, age, fine, and filter, and bottle the wine. We'll be going over that with white wines a little bit later today. Any questions on any of that? Perfect. Okay, let's get into closures, right? You've got to close your bottle of wine somehow. There are different ways to do it. There's the traditional way with cork from the cork oak. There are screw caps, aka Stelvin enclosures. There are synthetic closures, which I'm not a fan of. And then there are glass closures, right? Let's start out with regular cork. And I'm going to ask some questions. If anyone wants to chime in, just give me some jazz hands. So, real cork is harvested from the bark of the cork oak. It's impermeable and elastic. I think someone corrected me yesterday. This is supposed to say permeable, which means a little bit of oxygen can get through, right? Someone jazz hands me. Why would we want a little bit of oxygen getting through? Anyone have any ideas? Cyrus.
Maybe secondary fermentation could get going in that case.
Ooh, not quite, but because you probably don't want a second fermentation going unless you're making champagne and you do it a different way, but I like where your head's at. Matt raised the hand as well, I think.
I just thought some stuff could escape naturally that needs to.
Yeah, both of those are on the right track. The main thing is oxygen will soften a wine, right? So wines have tannins and polyphenols, and a little bit of oxygen will help soften those over time. So if you're putting a wine in your cellar, and most wines that would go into a cellar, if they're red wines, usually have pretty good tannins and acid because those things help preserve wine. A little bit of oxygen coming through is a good thing because it'll help soften. That's the whole point of cellaring it, right? Is this game you play of finding the perfect time when the wine's perfectly ready to drink. Okay, and oxygen also can add some interesting flavors to wine as well. So if we were to go into business, if Lauren and I wanted to start a cork oak business, I don't know that we should. I would hope you guys would say don't do it, because these cork oaks that we planted last June are only half a year old, and we've got to wait another 25 to 30 years before we can even harvest them, right? And then you have to wait another 9 to 13 years to reharvest. See what this gentleman's doing here, taking all the bark off, right? So it's a long game, right? Can anyone tell me what country, does anyone jazz hand it, what country produces the most cork? Cyrus knows that one.
Portugal.
Yes, point to Cyrus. I really like your jazz hands, by the way. They're really intense. I like it.
Thank you. Yeah, I was feeling.
Fantastic. Yeah, it is Portugal. They harvest 50% of the world's wine cork production. Spain is another country that harvests a lot. And then there are advantages of using cork. Does anyone know what that would be? Have you ever heard of a corked wine? Anybody? That is from the chemical or mold called TCA. It's wine cork. It's a corked bottle of wine, right? It's a mold that affects the figure you hear a lot is 6% of all wines. Has anyone experienced this? And if so, what do you think what does it smell like? Anyone want to chime in? I can't tell if Matt's hand is still raised or from the last time, or he wants to chime in.
When it starts to smell like vinegar.
Who said that?
Bobby.
Bobby, yeah, you can kind of get a vinegary thing, but really it gets really musty. It can smell like wet newspapers. It really kills the fruit in a wine. The thing I always say, what it smells like to me is like a ride at Whitewater or a water ride, you know what I mean? Like at Six Flags, like that kind of weird old water smell. That to me is what a corked bottle of wine smells like. Maybe I can, next time we have one at the office, I can leave one around for you guys to smell. You've undoubtedly drank one before and maybe didn't realize, but that's a big problem in the world of wine. So if you were to use a synthetic cork, you would not have this problem, but you'd have other problems. To me, it's these are made out of plastic. That's not really sustainable. There's no risk of TCA, but I don't know how you guys feel about these. I don't like them. They're hard to get back in. It feels cheap to me. That's just me. And the thing is, if you're going to do this, why not just use a Stelvin, a screw cap, right? One man's opinion. But some people really like the whole ceremony of, using a corkscrew and opening a bottle, even with these plastic ones here. I say, why not just use a Stelvin screw cap enclosure, right? It's aluminum. It's huge in Australia and New Zealand. Even their big red wines that they cellar, most often use screw caps. And it's kind of interesting because we said cork, right, will let a little bit of oxygen through. Stelvin doesn't really let any oxygen through. But now they've been cellaring a lot of these big reds in Australia and New Zealand with these Stelvin caps. They're actually cellaring really well because no oxygen is getting through. So they're kind of cellaring at a slower rate, if that makes sense. So I'm team Stelvin. No TCA, of course. And it can make them last even longer. Questions about any of this thus far? Cool. And then you got your glass closure here, which I don't know how you guys feel about the Bertrand, but I think it's hard to open, but it's really cool. I think it looks cool. It might be a little bit more expensive, but it looks really cool. Okay. Any questions there? Easy cheesy, Japanesey. Let's go into proper service. So a bottle of wine has 25.3 ounces. That means if you're in a restaurant serving, you got 4 to 6 glasses per bottle, basically, right? Depending on whether you're going to pour 4-ounce pours, 5-ounce pours, 6-ounce pours. A red wine glass is usually pretty big, and the reason for that is we'll talk about a little bit is to aerate, right? So you don't want to overfill a normal wine glass that can hold 70 to 25 ounces unless it's Connor's special Friday night wine glass, which is to the top sometimes. All right, so if we are pouring, you want to make sure you're pouring with the label out so that your customers can see what you're pouring. Okay, any questions there? Okay, let's move into glassware. So have you guys heard of Riedel, the company, the stemware company? We're probably one of the most famous glass stemware, wine glass stemware companies in the world, right? And they make a specific glass for every single varietal. They got a Cabernet glass, they've got a Zinfandel glass, they added that a few years ago. They've got all sorts of different glasses because they feel, and I agree, that there is a perfect wine glass for every varietal or wine. Different shapes can highlight different aromatics, right? Or flavors for a wine. Okay. Stemmed or stemless isn't important as far as aroma and flavors, but if you're using stemless, just be careful because you can kind of warm up wines with your hand. You'll transfer some heat. So there's always that.
How do you pronounce or spell the name of that glassware company you were talking about?
Oh yeah, Riedel. They are industry standard, the best. There are plenty of other wine glass companies, but they're kind of the most respected. They're, I believe if they're not Austrian, they're German. I can't remember if they're Austrian or German, but we have some. They make some really affordable, just kind of like just basic wine glasses. There's one as far as we use them for both red and white wines. I can look that up for you if you're interested, whatever the model, the one we have. But they're perfect because they're kind of in between a red and a white glass. It's not a huge red glass. It's not not tiny, but smaller white glass. And talking about those, so usually white wine glasses, we want the bowl to be a little bit smaller. Why is that, you ask? Well, so most white wines have floral aromatics, and we want to highlight those floral or fruits, right? So we want a smaller glass that's a little more, hits you a little bit more prominently. Whereas a red wine glass, usually a bit bigger, right? Anybody want a jazz hand? Why would we want red wine glasses to be bigger? Kelly, what you got?
I would assume it's so that it can aerate more and get more oxygen into the wine.
Yes, exactly. Is that what you were going to say, Taylor? Sorry, I saw your hand too late. Yeah, larger bowl means more aromas. You can aerate, right? Because like we said, tannins with oxygen can really be softened. So just even swirling a little bit can really change the wine. Sparkling wine glasses maintains effervescence. That's why it's a little bit thinner here, narrower. And if you guys want to try this at home, get the same wine, and it works really well with sparkling, works with any of these. Put it in a solo cup versus a proper wine glass and just notice the differences. You'd be surprised that there is a difference, right? And then a dessert wine glass is smaller to limit the portion. Any question?
What about those Tervis wine cups?
What's that?
You couldn't see my hand, my bad. What about those not the Tervises and the Yetis and stuff?
Oh yeah, especially if you're on the go, right? You need to be somewhere, but you still want to drink wine. Oh yeah, fits perfectly in the cup holder, better than a nice staff. Kidding, of course. But yeah, one of the big rules here is when we're showing wine or we're tasting wine, you don't want your white wines too cold, right? What happens here, if it's too cold, it's going to hide aromatics. If you ever go to a bar and you order a well shot of anything, let's say you order a well shot of vodka, I don't know who you are, you monster, why are you ordering well vodka? But if you did, they're going to get it really cold, right? Why do they get bad vodka cold?
They can't taste it.
So you can't taste it, exactly, because you don't want to highlight those aromatics, right?
That's why Arbor Mist says serve well chilled.
Oh yeah, it says please get as close to freezing as possible. I might as well say, right? Yeah, you're trying to hide stuff. Yeah, I was tasting next to another guy. He had an ice cold Pinot Grigio, and I was like, why is this so cold? And he goes, you don't want to try this at regular temperature. So he had to show it, but he was showing it at colder than it maybe should have been. So with red wines, and by the way, I love serving red wines a lot cooler than normal. We'll get into that in a second. But if a red wine is at room temperature, to me, that's too warm. Here's another thing you can do. Heat up a red wine above, let's say 75 degrees, and then taste it next to a red wine you put in the fridge for 10 minutes and taste the two. This will taste like, have that bourbon burn. It's not a good experience. This is one of the biggest things if you're tasting with the customer, showing. I know you guys don't do a ton of tasting with the customers, but if you're ever at an event or a rest, if you're ever in a situation with them or hanging out with them, you would definitely do not serve red wine too warm or white wine too cold. What I like to do is a 30-30 rule. This has impacted my time at United more than any other rule when I was popping around tasting people's stuff. This is the most important thing. It was night and day for me as far as getting placements. So put your reds in the fridge 30 minutes before leaving the house for me, right? And I would take whites out 30 minutes before serving for people at my house, more like 20 probably, because you want to highlight those aromatics, right? But this is the big one. Serving reds at cellar temperature is night and day. Your customers will say, oh, wow, that's really good, because they're actually getting it served at the right temperature, right? Y'all try that. And I put rotate ice packs. And what I would do is just take whites out of the fridge, put them in a bag, and then put the ice packs on the reds, right? And keep those cooler, and then let those kind of warm up a little bit. Okay. Any questions there? Jazz hands if you're going to try that. That's the 30-30 for your red wines next time. Cool. All right, this is just for your reference here. The main thing here, the one white wine that you can neglect that rule is sparkling wines. You get them as cold as possible. But everything else is I follow the 30-30. Okay, proper storage. You want a cool area. Heat is the #1 enemy for wine. Light is also not good for wine. UV rays will zap your wine. You want to keep a consistent temperature. High humidity is better, and you want to lay down your wine. Who wants to, jazz hand? Why would you want to lay your wine down? Brent?
Get some moisture on the cork. Get it to
Yes.
swell up a little bit.
Exactly. And it's the same reason that you like high humidity, right? If you stand your wine up for several years, the cork will dry out. And if you guys have anyone ever tried to open a bottle with a dry cork, it falls apart, right? And what happens when it dries out? Oxygen gets through. It creates cracks, oxygen gets through, then you have an oxidized wine. That will taste a lot like vinegar. We were talking about vinegar a minute ago. It's not a good situation. So you always want to lay them down. If it's going to be longer, it's fine if you buy something and you're going to drink it in a few weeks, keep it up. That's totally fine. But if you're cellaring it, lay it down. And I didn't put this one down here. This is my predecessor, Greg Gibbs, but don't shake it, which reminds me of that "Don't Shake Your Baby" campaign they had to make. So don't shake your wine. I don't know why you would. Just don't shake it. All right. Now we're getting into actual wines here. I'm going to start with sparkling. So do this while I'm kind of going through it. With your 2 glasses, if you would pour the Corbel in glass 1, and then the Villa Sandy Prosecco in glass 2. We've got the Wikipedia definition of everything. For each wine style, I'm not really going to go over it because we'll talk about all this stuff. It basically means it's bubbly. Okay, we want, if you can, with 2 glasses, it's good because I want to compare and contrast a bottled fermented sparkling wine versus a tank fermented. All right, so let's learn about that. I think we learned about this in the main lesson, right? How do you make wine in general? You've got sugars in your grapes, right? You crush them. Then you're going to add yeast, right? Yeast will eat the sugar. And what does the yeast create? What is that byproduct? It's alcohol and CO2, carbon dioxide. Now, when you're making regular still wine, this all happens in a big vat, right? And it's open vat. So you create your alcohol, but then that CO2, you know, it's bubbling in the fermentation. That CO2 just goes up in the atmosphere. You lose it, right? With sparkling wine, we want to capture those bubbles, that bubbling CO2. So there's two main ways we can do that. We can either capture it in a bottle, or we can capture it in the tank with a closed, sealed off tank. Make sense? We're going to capture those bubbles, that CO2, because that CO2 will dissolve back into the wine, and that's where the bubbles come from. So the two main ways, and arguably the most famous or respected way in the world, is bottle fermentation via the traditional method, okay? The traditional method is also called the champagne method, or if you look at your bottle of Corbel here, it says right above the name Corbel, it says Méthode Champenoise. In French, that means champagne method, right? So that is the most famous, respected way. A sub method of that is called the transfer method, we'll get into. And then we have our other one called the tank method, where that fermentation takes place in a sealed tank. Any questions yet? This is probably the most complicated thing we'll talk about today. So stop me if I'm going too fast or if you have any other questions. Okay. So let's talk about first the traditional method. So we're actually, and we do this in Champagne, we did this at Corbel, we do this a lot of different places. We start by making wine. We've made a wine already. It's low alcohol, high acid wine. It's usually like 8, 9, 10% ABV, right? Low alcohol. Now, so it's just still wine, just a regular wine. Now, but we want to make champagne out of it, or we want to make it sparkling. So in this bottle, we're going to add a little bit of sugar and a little bit of yeast, right? Because yeast, if sugar's around, yeast is going to eat it, right? So then we put like a little crown cap, kind of like the Corbel has this little crown cap on it. Then we're going to crown cap it, and a second fermentation happens in the bottle, okay? Because that yeast goes, whoa, baby, there's some sugar over here. And it eats it. What are the byproducts? A little more alcohol, which brings it up to 11 or 12%, what most sparkling wines are, and CO2, right? And then those bubbles are dissolved into that bottle. Now, here's the deal. That yeast that just ate that sugar, whenever that sugar's gone, the yeast has nothing to do and it'll die, right? And what dead yeast we call lees. This is a French word for dead yeast. It kind of looks like nutritional yeast, if any of you guys have used nutritional yeast. And so it's kind of gunky and you don't want it in the bottle, but it adds a lot of interesting yeasty, biscuity, bready flavors, right? That's why champagne sometimes tastes like bready or toasty or bit like biscuits, So anyway, you got all that gunk that would normally fall down to the bottom of the bottle. But see what this guy is doing over here? This process is called riddling. If you ever seen the pictures of the monks riddling bottles. So these bottles are all upside down. He is riddling, which means he's turning the bottles every X number of hours. So make sure all that yeast gets to the bottom, AKA the top of the bottle. They're collecting it over a series. I can't remember the time frame usually, but it takes a while to make sure all that yeast dies and goes down to the bottom. Make sense? Okay, so now you've got this yeast that's congregating. It's all hanging out down here, right? At the bottom of your bottle, upside down. So what do? They freeze this, they quick freeze this little bit of the bottle here. So you basically have a yeast ice cube, okay? It's very strange, but they freeze this top part where all the yeast is, and then they pop the top and the yeast cube pops out. It's called disgorging. Make sense? This yeast cube goes flying out. But now they've got a bottle that has a little room left over, right? Because you lost some wine in there too. So you're going to top up, which is called the dosage, okay? So you're going to add a little more wine and then a little extra sugar, depending on how sweet you want the wine to be. That determines how sweet or dry you want the sparkling wine to be. Clear as mud, right? That's the bottle fermentation process. Any questions on that? Okay. This transfer method isn't as important. I just want to let you know it's basically the same method, but it's appropriate to have this Korbel bottle here because you can't do the regular traditional method in these small bottles because they don't want it's a hassle. You'd have to do all these little mini bottles at the do the dosage and all that and that. So, and you don't want to, all those little mini yeast cubes. So what you do here is base wine, add your sugar and yeast, do the second fermentation. This is all the same as the regular in bottles, right? You've got your yeast autolysis, the yeast dies, but then you take those bottles, the regular size bottles, and you empty them into a tank. And then you filter them and fill them up into these small bottles or big bottles. So the transfer method is really just for small sizes or really big sizes because they don't want to do it with the big bottles or small bottles. Same thing though, basically. Make sense? Okay. Any questions on the bottle fermentation tank, or sorry, the traditional method? Cool. Well, now let's learn about the tank method. We use this, Prosecco would be the most famous example of the tank method. So you've got your dry base wine, right? Just like we started with in the bottle, from the bottle method, but we got a dry base wine. We throw it into a big old tank that is sealed and pressurized. Then we add our yeast and sugar, right? So that yeast starts eating that sugar, which is the second fermentation. And then once that's done, we filter out that yeast and then we bottle it under pressure. And then we've got a dry sparkling wine. Now you might ask, why would we filter the yeast out, right? Instead of doing, well, for one, you're not popping out a big ice cube, right? So you filter out that yeast. But what that does, it makes the style of Prosecco or tank method wines taste a lot different than the bottle traditional method, right? So the traditional method wines, you get a lot more of the yeast on them, right? Versus a Prosecco, let's say, that they filter out that yeast because their goal here is to make a kind of fresh, fruity, a fresh wine like this one, Il Fresco, the fresh guy, right? That's what Villasandi means, Il Fresco. So that's their style they're trying to accomplish. That's what they like in northeastern Italy, where we make Prosecco. Any questions there? Cool. And then the last one we'll learn about is called the tank method, or the Asti, or sorry, the next sub tank method we're going to learn about is the Asti method, which is a little bit different because there's no second fermentation. It's just one fermentation, right? So you don't start with wine, you start with grape juice. You put it into that sealed pressurized tank. You add your yeast, and then your first fermentation is happening. But what happens? Around 5% alcohol, you stop it by getting it really cold. Because yeast cannot live when it's really cold, right? So you lower the temperature in that tank. And guess what? That yeast only ate about half of the sugar. So there's still a good half of the sugar left, right? So it's lower alcohol, it's sweet, and because it's in this pressurized tank, it's got some sparklingness to it. and then you filter the yeast out so they won't work anymore, and then you bottle it. So if any of you guys had a Moscato d'Asti, that's why it's sweeter. It usually has a little bit of effervescence. And you've got a sweet sparkling wine. Any questions? That's kind of this is the most complicated thing we're going to be dealing with today. Right now, let's go ahead and, if you got it, taste your Korbel. I forgot a spit cup. Whoops. Yeah, taste through your Korbel while I'm talking about where we make this. So the most famous place for bottle fermented sparkling wines is Champagne, right? Champagne, France. We usually make it with Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Meunier. Let's see, can anyone tell me, has anyone had a Cremant before? Jazz hands if you had one. Cyrus has had one. Okay, cool. So Cremant is basically the Champagne method made outside of Champagne region, right? So you can have a Cremant de Loire, Cremant de Bourgogne is the word for Burgundy, Cremant de Limoux. Who can name a Cremant de Limoux that we sell? Anyone just chime in if you want. Do you guys sell the Gerard Bertrand Cremant de Limoux? Yeah, that one is a pretty famous one. Limoux, this little town in southern France, used to be the most famous sparkling wine in the world before Champagne overtook it. But these were really famous, if you can believe it, back in the 1700s and before. And then Spain is another place that we make bottle fermented. Have you ever had a cava? Anyone had a cava? Cava is bottle fermented sparkling wine. And then of course we make it all over the New World too, like Korbel is. And this, so when you think about this, if you're talking to your customers, it's pretty impressive because, you know, what makes us different than, I don't know, not to knock J. Roget or any of the other ones at that level, but this is a much more expensive method to make, right? You're actually fermenting in a bottle. That's really important. Okay, and if we're talking about tank fermented, we're talking about mainly Prosecco, which is in northeastern Italy in the Veneto up here, near Venice, etc. And if we're talking about Moscato d'Asti, we're talking about Piedmont, which is northwestern Italy. Okay, any questions? Now, real quick, let me talk about these. Who here's had a Brut? Well, we're drinking Brut. Has anyone here had extra dry Champagne before? Bobby has. Yeah, Austin has. A lot of you guys have. So one thing we don't always realize is extra dry is a little bit sweeter than Brut. Here's the scale from dry to sweet. So Doux would be the sweetest. Demi-sec is the second sweetest, medium dry. Sec is dry. Now you might be wondering, because I asked this question about a year ago, but why do they label it like this? This is dumb, right? Like why don't they label it in a logical way? And the answer is, back a couple hundred years ago, sec was the dry style, right? In France when they were making champagne. So, oh, this is sec, but it's actually fairly sweet. There's a good amount of sugar left in it, right? So, but tastes were changing and people wanted something drier. Taylor, you got a question?
Where would the Korbel like rosés fit in to this scale, like the sweet rosé and the Brut rosé?
So does it say Brut rosé? If it's Brut, it'll be in this, and all of these have sugar minimums and maximums, right? To be in this. So yeah, rosé, it's fine that it's rosé, it would still go by the scale. If it says sweet rosé, it might be in the Doux category. Let me know if you see a bottle, let me know what that says. But yeah, so a couple hundred years ago, this was the dry, and some people wanted drier champagne, right? So then they came up with extra dry. And they said, oh, this is drier than sec, right? And then people said, oh, we still want something drier. So then they came up with Brut, which was even drier than extra dry. And then they went extra brut, and then brut nature means you don't add any dosage. That means, remember, dosage is what you add at the end, sugar and a little bit extra wine. You don't add any of that. It's just natural. So no sweetness. Does that make sense?
Where would Prosecco fall on this? Obviously, it's sweeter, but compared to like Dew or Demi-Sec.
That's a great question. They're usually not gonna, they don't necessarily have a scale in Prosecco. I would say most Prosecco though would be in the extra dry category, perhaps. Some in the sec, but they don't use the same French terms. If that answers that. Okay. Let's do this real quick. I want you to taste the Korbel versus the Prosecco. And I want everyone to unmute if you can. And I want to talk about it. It's going great with my coffee.
Yeah, wine and toothpaste, not a good combination.
Yeah, right. So let's talk about the differences in these two. Does anyone notice a difference in the bubbles?
Mhm.
Which bubbles do you prefer? What do you think?
Korbel seems to be bubbling more.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, the Il Fresco feels like they're like a softer bubble. To me. And then let's talk about what do we when we smell it. What are the aromatics? Do we get is one fruitier or more floral than the other? There's no wrong answers.
I would say the Prosecco is fruitier or has more aroma to it.
I agree with that. And so we normally in this exercise, we use Nicolas Feuillatte champagne, but we were out of stock because we were out of stock of everything. So Korbel is bottle fermented. It's less yeasty. The Feuillatte will show you a lot of yeast that a lot of champagne has, but Korbel has a little bit of that yeast on it, right?
Different versus the bottle cap that's on the small one versus the cork that's in the big one.
Is it different, you're asking?
Yeah, would it be different? Like you talk about the bubbles and like versus the carbonation or anything from it.
That's actually a good question. I really don't know if there is a difference between the bottle cap or the cage. But we can look that up though. I mean, I think the wine's the same. But I don't know that the cage actually affects it in a different way. I know that, well, for instance, so I've never seen a cage on a smaller bottle. You usually get these, like the Il Fresco has this little guy top on it. So I've never noticed a difference, but there might be. So we'll look that up.
When you say cage, are you talking about the wire thing that you untwist to pop off prior?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, any other differences? I agree. I think the Prosecco is fruitier, right? And more floral. And the whole idea with it's supposed to be kind of fresh. And that's what, when you're making Prosecco, that's what you're going for, right? Usually the style is like a fresher, ready to drink. Like this style, you're not going to age really a long time. Versus champagne with that yeast, kind of yeasty biscuitiness. You know, a lot of people will age champagne for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. And people are into that flavor profile. Not all champagne is really yeasty, but I'm just saying it has more than, in general, than Prosecco. Which do you guys prefer?
I like that Korbel.
I do too.
Nice. Okay.
Korbel.
Prosecco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Korbel
I like
is
them
like
both.
an acidity.
I love the Prosecco though. I think it's I think it's really good.
Yeah, the Prosecco is a little easier for an everyday drink than
Korbel, it's heavy.
Yeah, the good news is they're both good. If you were to take it, like, let's say, if you guys ever done the Pepsi challenge with a customer, where you take La Marca or something, and Villa Sandy will kill any other Prosecco. I know we sell La Marca downstate, so I'm not trying to disparage it or anything, but most other Proseccos get beaten by Villa Sandy. I'm a big fan. Okay, cool. Any other questions or thoughts about these two? All right, I think we're gonna take a 3-minute bio break. And then we'll get back and start doing white wines. Does that sound good? So I'll just see you guys back here right at 10 a.m. All right. All right, guys, as you're filtering back in, go ahead and pour the Sonoma Cutrer Chardonnay in glass 1 and the Sauvignon Blanc in glass 2.
What was the second one?
The Sauvignon Blanc, the Southern Sauvignon Blanc.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okie dokie. All right, let's go ahead and get it back and going again. White wine, here's your wiki definition. I'm not going to go over that. Let's talk about how we make white wine. Okay, a lot of choices when you're making white wine. First thing we're going to do though is the crush, right? We're bringing in the grapes. This is where you would see the person stomping on the grapes in the old day to release some of the juices here. Then the next thing, the all important difference between white wines and red wines happens right here. Okay, you're going to press the grapes first to get them off the skins. Why would we do that? Does anyone want to take a stab? Why do you want to press them right now?
You don't want the color from the skin,
Color.
Yep, exactly. Who said that?
Bobby.
Bobby.
Sorry, I can't even see my hand.
Oh no, it's all good. I didn't even ask for jazz hands that time. Yeah, you for majority of white wines, you're not trying to get color and anything else, polyphenols and whatnot from the skins, right? You want a fresh wine a lot of the time. So you'll press those grapes, that grape juice off the skins, and now you've got grape juice, right? Right here, looks like Welch's, right? Now it's time to ferment that juice, right? So we got a couple options here. You can do more often than not, probably, you're in a stainless steel tank. But you could also ferment in oak barrels, smaller ones, which impart more flavor. The smaller the barrel, the more flavor you get from the barrel. Or you can ferment, if you want it, in these large oak vats, right? Oak barrique, big barrels here, Foudres they're called. So you've got choices. Usually, if you're trying to make a really crisp, light, refreshing wine, you're going to go stainless steel, right? Okay, then we can mature it if we'd like, right? You could either mature it after you've made your wine in the same three options here: big Foudre, big barrels, small barrels, or stainless steel. And you know, you usually have to let it settle a little bit after you ferment, but you don't have to mature it necessarily for long. You could make it, let it, you know, let it settle a little bit, and then bottle it soon after. And then you bottle it, and you got some white wine. Questions here? This is kind of bird's eye view of what's happening. All right, easy enough, right? Now, when you're maturing it, you can do it, we call it aerobically, that's with oxygen, right? You can do that with barrels. We do this a lot with grapes like Chardonnay, because you can add really interesting flavors with oak, right, with barrels. And another thing why barrels are similar to, like, let's say a cork, is it lets a little oxygen in, right, through the wood. And that can add some interesting flavors. It can soften things, and barrels can also round a wine out and add flavors of vanilla, spices, baking spices, et cetera, et cetera. Barrels, new barrels are really expensive, right? So another option you have is using staves, which is down here. I think we use staves in some of the 14 hand stuff, like the reds. These just add a lot of the oak flavor, but they're not, it's a fraction of the price of new barrels, right? Or even used barrels. Or chips. You can have these ground up oak chips you just throw in, and then you would rack your wine off of it. So that is maturing with oxygen. And without oxygen would be stainless steel containers here, or tanks, or just bottles. Questions there? Cool. Okay, so while we're going through this, I just want to talk about a couple tasting tools I like to use just to kind of compartmentalize everything while we're tasting. I like to look at the color first. Is it the color closer to straw or yellow or gold? I like to check the aromatics, and let's do this with let's do it with the Chardonnay real quick, which should be the first one in your glass, right? So if I'm taking a look at this, I especially like to compare it to the Sauvignon Blanc right next to it. I'm holding these up. You can tell there's a color difference, right? Can you guys see it? If you're holding at a 45-degree angle, one to me is a little more yellow to gold than the other. Which one would you guys think?
Chard.
Yeah, the Chardonnay to me
More
is
yellow.
Yeah, I think the Chard's a little more yellow, maybe even have some flecks of gold, but probably like a pretty solid yellow, right? So when you were going through these things, it's really just to kind of build a map of what the wine is in your brain. If you're if you ever want to learn blind tasting, this is really useful for that. But I like to just kind of comment. And the Sauvignon Blanc, what do you guys think that would be?
Straw.
Yeah, closer to straw, right? Now, aromatics, this is a nifty one here. Your nose will probably unlock more about a wine than anything else. When I say aromatics, I like to think of the primary fruit flavors, the primary flavors and aromas, which means fruit flavors, right? So when we're talking about aromatics, are they neutral, moderate, or intense? So when I put the Chardonnay up about right here to my nose, do the fruit aromas jump out at you, or are they a little more neutral? Do you have to really kind of find them, get in there and find it, or do they jump out of the glass? And I'm not talking about oaky flavors or buttery flavors. We'll talk about those in a minute. Just the fruit aromatics. What do you guys think? It's tough. Chardonnay is usually,
I'd say moderate.
yeah,
just
Chardonnay.
oak.
Yeah, exactly. Chardonnay is usually moderate to neutral, as far as the fruit goes, and then you get all sorts of oak and vanilla and stuff from and mallow stuff like butter and stuff. Now compare that to the Sauvignon Blanc real quick. Those aromatics, to me, I don't know if you agree, but are more than the Chardonnay, right? They jump out a little bit more, the fruit aromas. And that's one thing you can look for. It's a good way to talk about the nose, right? We're talking about the nose of the wine. Okay, acidity, this is a good one. So take a big sip of the wine, and then after you spit, really pay attention to how much saliva is generated under your tongue, okay? This is how we measure acidity. So if you were to like lick a lemon, for instance, your mouth would water a ton under your tongue. And that's just your body's natural reaction, right? So higher acid wines will make you mouth water a lot. Moderate or low acid wines, not as much. And if you start to pay attention, you'll start calibrating. So let's take a sip of this and see how. And it's hard to make a call when you haven't compared it to anything else. If you want to go ahead and taste the Sauvignon Blanc and do a side-by-side on the acid, that's another good thing to do. If anyone's done that, which one do you think has more acid?
Sauvignon Blanc.
Sauvignon Blanc.
Right. Yeah. I would agree with that. I think you get a lot more saliva from the Sauvignon Blanc. That means, and that's fits. I'm glad you all said that because that fits my charts here. Usually Sauvignon Blanc has a lot more acid, higher acid. High acid means usually will be equated to more refreshing, right? If you have a high acid white wine, you're like, ooh, that's good, that's refreshing. Versus a moderate to low, which this Chardonnay would be more moderate, I would call it. It doesn't mean it's not refreshing, but it's got other purposes in mind. It's a different style, right? All makes sense? And then when we go through wine, I like to talk about, this is just me, I like putting them in kind of 3 different categories here. Orchard fruits. Orchard fruits are fruits that grow on trees, right? So apples, pears, lemons, more like a citrus fruit. But then we've got stone fruits, which would be peaches, apricots. If y'all know what a stone fruit is, just a fruit with a big stone, a big seed in the middle, right? A pit, right? So stone fruits or tropical fruits like mangoes, bananas, whatever this little guy is down here, little lychee. Fig, thank you. Who said that? Austin?
Yeah, that was me.
Austin, you get a point. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's just the kind of way to, when we're walking through, we're talking about stuff, I like to put them in those categories here.
Got a question.
Sure.
So when you're giving descriptors, when it's more acidic, you said it's refreshing, but for Chardonnay, is that when you would hear people say more like it's softer or drier, or like what kind of descriptors do they use for the lower to moderate acidity wines?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think you might say, like, you hear more things for the high acidity than you do for the low. Like you would hear crisp or lively or, you know, refreshing. You just might not hear those words more like for something. I don't know that anything moderate to low acid are actually described in a certain way. I do know sometimes that correlates with body, not always, but sometimes lower acid things tend to be bigger bodied wines. So that you can look for that. That's sometimes a correlation. But I don't know that you hear, I can't think of the opposite of what that would be. I guess the real opposite way would be flabby, which is a negative thing. Like if a wine does not have enough acid, that's the negative. You call it a flabby, big flabby wine, right? Okay, let's talk about Chardonnay. Winemakers love Chardonnay because you have a lot of options. It can grow in a lot of different places, and that's why it's all over the world, right? And it will really reflect the different styles of the terroir and all the things that it's growing around. And there are a lot of options as a winemaker, right? So here is the different ways, the different styles of Chardonnay in different climates, right? A cool climate. When I say cool climate, I mean pretty cool. I'm talking about northern France, like Burgundy, right? Moderate climate, you might think Sonoma or Russian River in Sonoma. You get more citrus fruits, stone fruits, and tropical fruits. And then warm climates, you might think Central Valley in California, Lodi would have moderate acid. And if you notice here, the cooler the climate, the higher the acid, right? The warmer the climate, the lower the acid. And why that is basically think about, all right, if you're a cooler climate, you've got your grape. The grape starts off, if you were to pick it way too early, if you've ever been to a vineyard in the middle of the summer and picked a grape and tried it, what is it like? It's really tart, right? It doesn't have any sugar yet. It's really, really tart. And then as it ripens, it gets sweeter, right? So up here in these cool climates, it doesn't ripen as much, right? So it's going to be a tart, the tartness is going to be different. It's going to be higher in cool climates. So when you turn that into wine, it has more acidity. There's more natural acid in the grape. Whereas in a really warm place, the fruit gets really ripe. It's been, ripened by the sun. It gets a lot of sugar in there, right? And as acid, so acid starts up here high and sugar down here as it gets ripened. If it ripens more and more and more and more, that the sugar goes up and the acid goes down. Does that make sense? So down here, like in Georgia, our tomatoes might be sweeter. Tomatoes might be sweeter than the ones you grow in Canada, right? Because this is a warmer climate. It's going to get more sugary. So that by the acid, that natural acid goes down. Okay, back to Chardonnay. Chardonnay, there's a lot you can do as a winemaker. They love to use malolactic conversion, which is basically a bacteria that you can throw into your batch of Chardonnay that changes malic acid into lactic acid. Lactic acid is what you find in butter and cream. So if you ever had a buttery or creamy Chardonnay, that's because they use malolactic fermentation or conversion. What do you guys think about this one? Do you see anyone get any butter or cream?
On the Chardonnay, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, for sure, right? Like a little bit of, definitely like a creaminess or butteriness on this one. Lees contact, this is what we were talking about in Champagne for a minute. This is when the dead yeast, the cells die. You can actually age the wine on that in these barrels. And it adds like a lot of interesting flavors, a breadiness, like we talked about for Champagne. People do this with Chardonnay and some other grapes a lot. And then oak aging. Chardonnay and oak go really well together. All that, the toasty, vanilla-y, nutty flavors, all really good for Chardonnay. So a lot of options as winemaker. There's my Karen from California who wants more buttery Chardonnay. Any questions on this? Cool. Here are the most famous Chardonnay growing regions. We got, Champagne up here, Burgundy. Burgundy is the most famous Chardonnay region in the world. So if you see a white Burgundy, it says it's called Bourgogne. It is Chardonnay. And one thing we haven't really hit on it, the main difference between Old World and New World, and why the Old World, aka Europe, is so irritating, is they name things by the place, right? Whereas the New World will name things by the grape. So when we have a bottle of Chardonnay, it's from California, it's named by the grape, right? We don't just call something a Napa white. But in Europe, they say, okay, you know, this place is so wonderful, so famous that, you know, if you get a white wine from Burgundy, it is Chardonnay. You have to know that, right? Super irritating, but good to know as well. Have you guys had Burgundy before? Any white Burgundy?
No.
Go grab one sometime in the future. And a good comparison would be like we've got Moillard, but if you just grab anything that says Bourgogne, Bourgogne, and it's white, and compare that to a California, like a let's say like a Rayburn, Russian River Chard, or Kendall Jackson Chardonnay or something like that, and then compare and contrast the differences. Okay, I got a question. Taylor, are you cool with me reading your question to the group? Okay, Taylor asked, low-cal wines are growing in popularity. They seem to be mostly Sauv Blancs and unoaked Chard. Is the oak barrel where a lot of the calories come from? That's a great question. Oak's not going to add calories. But I think for that style of Chardonnay that is oaky and has mallow, etc., oftentimes has a little bit of residual sugar, just that style. It's kind of a riper style in California. So they're going to make something that's really light and fresh. And that lightness, freshness, those grapes might be a little less ripe and would have a little bit less sugar. I don't know actually how they cut the sugar from it or not. But the style of the less sugar works better, I think, with a lighter style wine. And Sauvignon Blanc is a lighter wine. So I think it would make most sense in that to be that style. But that's a good question as far as how do they cut the calories? I'm gonna write that down. All right, great question. Here are some of our Old World wines. Chablis, if you've ever heard of Chablis, this is part of Burgundy. This is night and day different than most California styles. So it's going to be unoaked, high acid, really, really good. Here's that word, Bourgogne. This means Burgundy. They even put Chardonnay on the label, which is nice. A lot of them do not. It just says Bourgogne, and you know if it's white, it's Chardonnay. If it's red, it's Pinot Noir. Same thing here. Pouilly-Fuissé is a region in France. And if you saw that, you would know, you would have to know, oh, Pouilly-Fuissé, of course, is famous for Chardonnay. This is a great bottle of wine. And then our friends at Antinori make the Chardonnay from Umbria. It's delicious. New World, pretty much everywhere makes Chardonnay, right? Because everyone loves Chardonnay. Here are some of our heavy hitters. This Stag's Leap Chardonnay does not use mallow. So if you want to see a wine that does not use mallow, but it has good oak, check out the Stag's Leap Chardonnay. All really good examples here. All right, so we've kind of already gone through this. We think this is yellow. We thought it was moderate intensity, and we called it moderate acidity. And what fruit did we think?
I catch banana.
Banana, I like it. I was thinking like yellow apple, maybe. Kind of like a lemon curd or something, like a lemon meringue or something. It's got the kind of creaminess. You guys like it? That was a resounding little head nod. You don't have to like it. I like it. I think it's pretty good. Okay. Any other questions on Chardonnay? Let's talk about Sauvignon Blanc, or Savvy B, right? Sauvignon Blanc works really well in cool or moderate climates, really well in cool climates. What does that correspond with? Like we were talking about, higher acidity, right? So Sauvignon Blanc usually is high in acidity. It's also really aromatic. The grape just happens to be really aromatic. Generally best drunk young. You're usually not going to find these in the cellar because you usually want, when you go for a Sauvignon Blanc, you want something fresh, right? You want a refreshing, hot, it's a hot day, I want a Sauvignon Blanc. Most have no oak, although there's a style in Napa that Mondavi made really popular called the Fumé Blanc, which is an oaked Sauvignon Blanc. And then some of them are blended with Semillon, which is another grape in Bordeaux. You don't need to worry about that really. When they're less ripe, you get this kind of herbaceousness here. You get the asparagus thing, gooseberries here as they get a little bit riper, into stone fruits and tropical fruits. You also, Sauvignon Blanc's where you get the cat pee tasting note from, if you've ever heard that. That's a Sauvignon Blanc thing. When we're talking about, we'll taste it here in a second. When we're talking about Sauvignon Blanc, the most famous place in the world, and its kind of ancestral home, is Sancerre. If you see a Sancerre, that's the little town, right? And it's white, you know it's Sauvignon Blanc. Same thing with its neighbor, Pouilly-Fumé, that's Sauvignon Blanc. And one way to always remember that is Robert Mondavi Fumé Blanc, right? He stole the Fumé from Pouilly-Fumé. He wanted consumers to know that it's Sauvignon Blanc because it's like the stuff that comes from the village, even though it's a lot different. Bordeaux, if you drink a white wine from Bordeaux, it's probably going to have some Sauvignon Blanc in it, more than likely Sauvignon Blanc, and then maybe some Semillon. And then our buddy Jerry B down here, Gerard Bertrand, makes a ton of Sauvignon Blanc. He makes everything down here. They all do down here in the Pays d'Oc. In the New World, anywhere cool enough, literally and figuratively, will make Sauvignon Blanc. Okay, so what do we think about this one? We already said we think it's straw, right? And I think we thought it was moderate plus or intense, right? The aromatics. And we thought the acidity was a lot more, right? What fruits are you guys getting on that? It doesn't have to be fruits from over here, by the way. I should have gone back to the other thing.
I always think, especially Marlborough region, it's like lemongrass.
I was gonna say I'm not getting that from the Sutter home like I would.
Not the Sutter, but New Zealand stuff.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
A big grapefruit blast.
Grapefruit, yeah. Grapefruit hits you in the face, right? But it's tangy, right? That's another word you can use for a lot of Sauvignon Blanc. It's tangy. It's got that. If you ever had a gooseberry, I actually went on a gooseberry quest because it's on the back of every bottle. It says gooseberry. I'm like, what the hell is this thing? So I finally found one that's shaped like a football, and it tastes just like New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc tastes. It's whatever that is. But a tanginess, like an unripe grapefruit for New Zealand. And a grassiness. They say like grassy for a lot of things, for a lot of different styles of Sauvignon Blanc. Do we like it? Not bad for a $5.99 a 4-pack, right? Okay, let's go ahead and pour the 14 Hands can in glass number 1. And then let's pour the Riesling, I think is next. Okay, Ducky. All right, I need a jazz hand. Tell me Can someone tell me, are Pinot Gris and Pinot Grigio the same grape or not? No hands? Oh, Matt,
They're-
sorry.
They are not. They're cousins.
So they're
Pinot
actually
Gris is in Washington, right?
so they're the same grape. They might be clonally different, but you can call them the same grape. So this is important. This is the important thing to know about these two grapes. Same grape, different styles, right? Different styles and climate that make them taste very different. And this is an interesting kind of case study to show you what a winemaker can do and what the environment can do, right? So Pinot Grigio, we'll start with this one. Pinot Grigio is made in northeastern Italy, right? What style are they going for? They want something really refreshing. They want it dry. Italy can get really hot in the summer, right? So they want something really refreshing, high acid. That's what they're looking for. So what they do is they harvest in August, right? They harvest earlier when the grapes have a little more acidity in them, and it's going to make a higher acid, refreshing, dry wine, right? And Alsace, which is where Pinot Gris got its start, which is Eastern France, okay? And you think France, it's going to be cooler, but actually in Alsace, I wish I had a map. There's this mountain range on the west, right? That's blocking all the rain. It creates a rain shadow. So it's actually like a pretty hot region. It gets a lot of sunshine in Alsace. So, and they choose, so that's a climate difference, right? The Alsace, the rain shadow, so it's warmer. They also choose to harvest it later when there's a little more sugar in those grapes, right? So more sugar means more alcohol, means it's full bodied, and it has time to develop some different flavors. So these are going to taste really different, even though it's the same grape. Now, when you're going through your stores and you see, let's say something from Oregon that says Pinot Gris, or anything anywhere in the New World that says Gris, this is the style they're going for versus Pinot Grigio. If you see something like our Luna Pinot Grigio that's from California but says Grigio, they're usually going for this style. Make sense? Cool. So same grape, but two different ways of kind of making it. So let's talk about this Pinot Grigio. What do we think? I think it's straw. Would you guys agree with that? Flecks of yellow, I mean, a little bit of yellow maybe, but mainly straw. And the aromatics, what do you guys think? Neutral, moderate, or intense?
Neutral.
Yeah, I think I saw Lauren say neutral. The mouth, yeah. This is about as neutral as it gets, right? As far as aromatics go, nothing really jumps out at you, right? That's not a diss. It's just that's just how it is. And let's check out the acidity. It's got decent acidity. I say moderate, right? It's about right for what it should be. It's kind of refreshing. And as far as fruits go, what do we think?
Bit of pear.
I like that, yeah. Like green pear, yeah. Maybe a little bit of lemon. Yeah, that's good. Pinot Grigio is kind of the vodka of wine.
Forget me one.
I love it, but it's just like not always a ton going on. In some examples there are for sure, but it's kind of like just kind of refreshing and, you know, hits the spot. Do we like it? Not bad for a can, eh? All right, let's get into Riesling. Riesling is one of the coolest grapes if you give it a proper shot. There have been some cheap examples that are really sweet and flabby that have given Riesling a bad name. But the best some of the best Rieslings in the world, or some Riesling in the world, some of my favorite stuff on the planet, right? A nice off-dry or dry Riesling is really good. Grows really well in cooler, moderate climates. Someone name a place they've heard Riesling grows.
Washington.
Washington. Thank you. Yeah, Taylor, for a point. Anyone else?
Germany.
Germany.
Yeah, who said that first? I heard a lady's voice first. I don't know who that was. Kelly?
It was me. Yeah, it was me.
Nice. Yeah, Germany. So think about Germany's really far north. I mean, it's cold there, right? So this one does really well. Where'd you go, Kelly? There you are. In cooler climates. It does not thrive in warmer climates. It's super aromatic. Go ahead and put it up to your nose. Usually pretty aromatic. Naturally high acidity, made in a range of styles from dry to sweet, and can age well. A lot of acid usually means it can age well. So every year my wife and I have a chicken wing and Riesling party. I highly recommend it. And what you do is the hotter the wings go, the more heat, the more sweet. So you start off with just like a dry Riesling. You could even do it with like Saint Michelle dry Riesling, right? Do that with mild wings, and then you move on to something off dry. Like this Eroica is pretty off dry. It's delicious. For medium, and then the hotter you get, you go sweeter and Riesling, and you'll be blown away. It's so good, sweet and heat. All right, cooler climate Rieslings have these kind of orchard fruits, and you get lime a lot. Moderate climates get citrus and stone fruits and tropical. And then this is something very special and particular about Riesling. People age these for a long time because they can, because it has so much acid. And you get these bottle aging notes, like this honeycomb here. You get honey. You also get this, they call it petrol, but it kind of smells like kerosene or gas. And we'll have to try one of those versions at some point, because you'll never forget it. And that's something that's a hallmark of Riesling, the grape. Okay, Washington State grows a ton of Riesling. France and Alsace, we're talking about that for Pinot Gris. They also grow a lot of Riesling there. Germany, obviously, and Austria. And then Australia grows a ton of Riesling. So what do we think about this one? Let's see. This to me is still strong. Does anyone, y'all agree? I think the aromatics are at least moderate, if not intense. What do you guys think of the acidity?
Not as bad. A little more creamy mouthfeel than the Sauv Blanc.
Yeah, pretty low.
Yeah, I think it's more moderate to almost low. It's maybe the lowest, which is odd for Riesling, but keep in mind we're drinking Riesling from Sutter Home from California. So I mean, that's not a diss. It's just it's going to have less acidity, right? It could be a warm place, and they even call this one sweet Riesling, right? So it's not as perceptible, if anything. What about the fruits? What do you guys think?
What are you trying to say?
Lime.
What was that, Dan?
Then what are you trying to say?
Oh, nothing. I would never disparage the brand that has made me a man rich beyond measure. No, I'm just kidding. It's been paying my mortgage though for 14 years. It's good stuff. I think this one you get. What do y'all think about tropical fruits for this? Like peaches and mango and stuff like that. Stone fruit. All right. Well, that concludes our tasting portion today. Let's talk about a couple more grapes, and then we'll talk about factors that affect cost. So Moscato is one of the most ancient, oldest grape varieties in the world. It's in a lot of different dessert wines. It's also the star of Moscato d'Asti. We were talking about the Asti method of sweet sparkling wine. It's one of my favorite flavor profiles, right? It's got this orange, it's got peaches, and there are a couple places in the world that make a dry Moscato that's like my favorite thing on the planet. It's called Zabibo in Sicily. Dry Moscato is great. Really important, we sell a lot of it as well, right? Chenin Blanc, another really important white grape. This is from the Loire Valley, is where the ancestral home here. And if you see, once again, those damn French and their place names instead of the grape, if you see something that says Vouvray, like this bottle right here, this is one of our Chateau Moncontour. It says Vouvray, so you have to know that it's white and it's from Vouvray, it's Chenin Blanc. There's that word demi-sec again. Chenin Blanc can be made in a lot of styles and still be really good. It can be made completely dry like sec here, or demi-sec, which we saw that on Champagne, right? Which meant a little bit of sweetness. That is what that means. So this one's slightly sweet, but they still have usually really good acidity because the grape just has good acidity. It's also the big grape of South Africa. It really just took off really well there. They love it there. They make a lot of it. You get a lot of citrus, tropical fruits, and really, has anyone had the Ken Forster line of wines? Seek one out and find one. They're really, really good. Even this one, this Petite, is like $10, and they make a Pinotage too. Any questions on Chenin? Talk about Viognier. Anyone tried a Viognier before? Really, really good. A good entry one would be this kind of blend, this Chenin Blanc Viognier blend, Terra d'Oro. Do you guys sell any of that? This is a really cool wine, and it's, once again, it's like $15. Viognier tends to be, especially if it comes from a warmer climate like in Napa, will be like a bigger bodied, fuller bodied wine, and it's got a lot of floral notes. You get a lot of these peaches, et cetera, et cetera. The ancestral home for this one is Northern Rhone, so kind of southern France, the northern part of the south of France. But we grow it a lot of other places too. Viognier, delicious. Okay, let's talk about a couple Italian grape whites. We've got Gavi de Gavi, and I'm going to need you guys to unmute because we're going to have to do a little pronunciation practice here. So Gavi is made with the grape Cortese from the Piemonte region. So I want everyone on 3 to say Cortese. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Cortese.
Cortese. Perfect. From Piemonte. So it's dry, light-bodied, and keep those mics on still because we're about to use them again. So dry, light-bodied, high acidity. That's kind of a theme you'll see in Italy, right? With their whites, they really like really high acid, really refreshing whites. And Gavi de Gavi is a good version of that, or a good example of that, I should say. Trebbiano is probably, I think, the most planted white grape in Italy. It's another dry, high acid, light-bodied wine. It's pretty neutral, kind of like our friend Pinot Grigio. So I'm going to need to hear it Trebbiano on 3. Ready? A 1, a 2, a 3.
Trebbiano.
No.
All right, a little bit of a delay there, but that's good. Like, take a breath. All right. That's it. You guys passed the pronunciation test, except for one more. Let's do Rias Baixas. 1, 2, 3.
Rias
Baixas, right? Perfect. So that is the area over here in northwestern green Spain that's famous for Albarino. Who's had an Albarino before? One of my absolute favorites, right? Fioboa is one that we have. We've got a couple other ones, Terras Gaudas, several, and they're all really good. They kind of have a saline thing, a saltiness that people talk about. So they're really crisp, really refreshing, usually unoaked. Fioboa she ages hers on the lees. We were talking about the lees, like, Chardonnay often is on the lees. Sometimes Albarino is on the lees as well. Really, really good. Okay, any questions on the white wines? That's it for white wines. We got 20 minutes to cover rosé and a few others. Let's zip on through it. Okay. Rosé can be produced in a lot of different ways, but this is the most important way. A short maceration period, right? 12 to 24 hours usually of skin contact. That means you harvest your red wine, right? You let it macerate for a much shorter, most red wines you're macerating while you ferment, and it could be a couple of weeks that you're macerating, right? Instead, you're going for a much shorter amount of time, even 12 hours, and the longer you macerate, the more color it pulls, right? So, you know, if you went, let's say you just went 12 hours, it might even look like a bit gray, like just a little bit of pink, right? If you went 24 hours or more, you might have a deeper colored rosé, deeper red. Another method is you can combine red and white grapes. That's not really a respectable way to do it. Dry rosé has grown incredibly in popularity in the last 10 years. Now it's all over the place. And the best grapes for it are Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, Barbera, and Pinot Noir. Usually these tend to be, in Syrah not so much, but thinner skin grapes, right? With a lot of like strawberry, raspberry flavors, berry flavors. So that's what we like to drink in a kind of a crisp rosé. Like the Bieler, which is fantastic. The Saint Michel dry rosé, you guys had that one? That was somebody's wine, wasn't it? Was that somebody's desert island wine? Lauren's, right? It's really good, right? A lot of berry stuff in there, really delicious. Then sweet rosé, aka blush. That's where like white Zin would also fall into this, or just rosés that have a little more sweetness. Usually Zinfandel, Muscat, Moscato, right? You get strawberries, cotton candy, and green. You get melon as well. So a little bit of residual sugar left in these. Let's see. Okay, any questions on rosé? All right, I know we're going fast, we're covering a lot, I apologize. But let's talk about factors affecting cost. So why are some bottles of wine $5 and another bottle can be $100, right? Why is that? Let's talk about it. So the vineyard, land, labor, and machinery, this tractor is no joke. It costs a lot of money, right? But in the long term, it might be more cost effective for making a cheaper wine to harvest it this way than, let's say, hand harvesting. Hand harvesting is really expensive. It's really labor intensive, but you can also harvest. You can be more, what's the word? Particular about what you harvest. You can say, don't harvest the bad bunches, only harvest the best bunches, right? So hand harvesting could cost more, even though the upfront cost of this could be a lot. So that labor cost could be really big. The winery, the big one here is oak. Storing a wine in oak is expensive, right? A barrel of new oak, a new oak barrel of French is $1,200 or $1,500. And divide that over these, I think it's 60 cases you get out of a barrel. That adds a lot of money per bottle, right? That's $2, $3, $4 per bottle right there, just from putting in a new oak, right? And the other equipment you got to pay off. There's a lot of things that could go into the price of the bottle. Packaging, distribution, and sales, right? European wines have to make a journey across the Atlantic to get to us, right? That costs money. It's not free. So a wine that would maybe be $5 in France becomes $8 in the US because we got to pay for to get across the pond, right? And taxes. A big one here would be the environment, right? As far as, if you're buying, let's say you're buying a vineyard in Napa versus a vineyard in Northern Georgia, it's going to cost a little bit more, right? It costs a little bit more in Napa, which is, I don't even know how many millions of dollars per acre, versus up in North Georgia where you get an acre for $3,000, right? So that all translates to the price of your wine, and it could be more coveted. If it says Napa on your bottle, you can charge more, right? Because it's a more famous area. versus if it says Dahlonega. No offense to North Georgia, I love North Georgia, but Dahlonega is not fetching the same money that Napa is, right? And to that point, the grape variety is really important, right? So if I'm in Napa, the demand in the market is for Cabernet or Chardonnay, number one, right? You can grow Cabernet. If I have a plot, I can grow whatever. I can grow Gewürztraminer, I can grow Viognier, I can grow whatever I want in Napa. But I'm gonna get a lot more money for my Napa Cabernet grapes if I sell them, right? Versus the Chenin Blanc I wanna make from, or the Scuppernong I wanna make, in Napa. So that will all determine the price of the bottle, grape growing, wine making, all of these things, and maturation. That goes back to the oak barrel thing. That all goes into the cost of a bottle of wine. Any questions on this? All makes sense, right? That's it for today. We're going to do a Kahoot though to test your knowledge, see how much you guys were paying attention. Okay, so go to kahoot.it, remember. I'll give you that code in just a second. What's everyone's favorite wine from today? Type in the chat if you want. That game pin is 207-8582. (207-8582). All right, Cyrus likes the Corbel the best. I like it. All right, is everyone in? Let's go ahead and get it going here. All right, question 1 of 7. Which of these sparkling wines uses the tank method? Is it Champagne, Cremant, Prosecco, or Cava? Which uses the tank? Or that means no, not in the bottle. Nice. Yes, most of you guys got Prosecco. Almost everybody. Cyrus on top, but Chardonnay is in second place there, followed by Brent. Question 2. Which of these bad boys is sweetest? Is it Brut, Extra Dry, Sec, or Demi-Sec? Which one is it? Nice, yes, Demi-Sec, right? Well done. Ooh, Taylor's on top now, and KP right behind. Question 3. Unlike red wines, most white wines are pressed before fermentation. Is that true or false? Most white wines are pressed before fermentation. Nice. Most of us got that. That is true. All right. Ooh, KP on top now. About halfway through. Winemakers love using techniques like malolactic fermentation and lees aging on this white grape. Who is it? It's Pinot Grigio, Albarino, Sauvignon Blanc, or Chardonnay? Okay, yeah. Chardonnay is correct. Now, Albarino, they do some lees aging sometimes, even some Pinot Grigios, but Malo, you're usually talking about Chardonnay for our purposes. Ooh, Brent on a hot streak. Can we stop him? Question 5. I'm a high acid white grape, often with pronounced grassy aromatics. Who am I? Am I Pinot Grigio, Sauvignon Blanc, Chenin Blanc, or Albarino? Who's grassy? Nice, yeah, Sauvignon Blanc. Well done. All right, KP, and then Kevin on a hot streak. Question 6. This grape is produced in droves in northwestern Green Spain. Pinot Grigio, Garnacha, Albarino, or Viognier? Cool. Yeah, it is Albarino, right? Yeah, Arias Baijas. All right. I think we got one more here. Cortese is the great white grape of which Italian region? Is it Gavi, Chianti, Veneto, or Sicily? Nice, Gavi de Gavi. All right, third place with 3 points, it is Lauren, well done. In second place with 7 points, Kevin, well played. And in first place, who do we have? It's KP. Nice. Everyone smile for the screenshot one more time. Not smiling, smiles. All right, good deal. Guys, that's it. Let's see here. Okay, so that's it. So between today and this time next week, I want you to do the third module in Principio, and then we'll have one last session. We'll taste the 3 red wines. We'll talk about wine regions, and that's pretty much it. Any questions on anything? Cool. All right, well, thank you guys for your time today, and I will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, thanks.
Thank you.